It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Thanks for joining us this fine Saturday afternoon. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. For prior podcasts of the show, for my columns on Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News, the American Thinker, and the Western Journal, or to check out some great merchandise, take a look at the marcscaringshow.com website. Well, the President of the United States is in Washington, D.C., addressing CPAC, the annual organization and get-together for conservatives from across the country, where they hear from conservative speakers spanning the spectrum from Michelle Malcolm to Ann Coulter to Vice President Mike Pence and now to the President of the United States, Donald Trump. It's been quite a week for the president while he was in Hanoi, Vietnam, trying to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula and denuclearize North Korea. His former personal lawyer and self-described fixer Michael Cohen was on Capitol Hill testifying against him. The media largely ignored the president's second summit meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, while it provided wall-to-wall coverage, of course, of Michael Cohen's testimony before the House Oversight and Reform Committee. And there's a great clip I heard on one of the national talk radio shows, maybe Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity or one of the other shows. There's a great clip of the various mainstream media programming, these talking heads on CNN, MSNBC, and other stations, using the word explosive over and over and over again, almost as if the Talking Points memo was distributed to all of the news talk radio hosts on the mainstream media and on the left, which is essentially the same thing, to use the word explosive and bombshell to describe the Michael Cohen testimony. But was it? Was it explosive? Did Michael Cohen unleash a series of bombshells on Washington, D.C. and the country? Some on the left are focusing on Michael Cohen's testimony about the payment that President Trump, when he was still a citizen but a candidate for the Oval Office, made to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Now, this has been covered wall-to-wall for about a year and a half now, but when asked by MSNBC's Chris Hayes, All In with Chris Hayes, California Democrat Maxine Waters talked about this Michael Cohen testimony on the Stormy Daniels payment, and she said, the president has lied. He said that he had not. The president said he had not paid off anybody, but he certainly has. So Maxine Waters and others on the left are characterizing the payment that President Trump, according to Michael Cohen, made to Stormy Daniels as a payoff. And I've even heard the word bribe and bribery being used by Democratic politicians and members of the media. So the left is characterizing Trump's payment to Ms. Daniels as an illegal bribe and as hush money. And I feel like we, the entire American people, not just you and I think we've discussed this Stormy Daniels payment ad infinitum. The payment was, and I've written articles and columns on this and the various periodicals, the various publications that publish my columns, the payment, the Stormy Daniels payment and the payment that was intended for Karen McDougal, those payments were completely legal. And the payment, and these types of payments are done all of the time. And it's not just by celebrities, people of great wealth and influence. It's done by businesses, large and small, and everyday people as they engage in living everyday life. Trump paid Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about their alleged affair. Now, neither the payment to keep quiet nor the alleged affair are illegal. Individuals, companies, employers, employees, they enter into settlement agreements that contain a confidentiality or a non-disclosure clause every day. I was just writing one for a client yesterday in a settlement of a standard commercial dispute. There's a confidentiality clause. There's a non-disclosure clause. Now, why can't the media report that Trump's payment to Stormy Daniels in exchange for her signing of the non-disclosure agreement is 100% legal? Now, we've also already discussed how, notwithstanding the legal position taken by the Southern District of New York, which is the law enforcement office that is prosecuting Michael Cohen on his bank fraud, tax fraud, and then of his campaign finance violations. The payment to Stormy Daniels, in my view, was not a campaign expense, and we've talked about this before. I've written about this before. I wrote about it in one of my columns on Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News, and I broke it down for my readers, and you can check out the website and find the column. I broke it down in detail there and on this show before, so I don't want to spend much time on it again. But during his testimony to Congress, Michael Cohen explained how that while the president was showing him around the Oval Office, the president allegedly said, "Don't worry, Michael, your January and February reimbursement checks are coming." They were FedExed from New York, and it takes a while for that to get through the White House system. So that was one of the bombshells, apparently, that Michael Cohen unleashed on Congress and the American people. That the president was talking to Cohen in the White House about Cohen's, quote, reimbursement, end quote, checks. Now, the New York Times, in its reporting on Cohen's testimony, quoted an election law professor at the University of California who said, to the extent that these were illegal campaign finance contributions, which were reimbursed and not reported, here is more evidence that Trump was conspiring to violate campaign finance laws as president. But my response is, again, the payment was not an illegal campaign finance contribution. The Southern District of New York charged Michael Cohen with making illegal campaign finance violations because of these payments. Cohen pled guilty to 2 campaign finance violation charges involving these payments to Stormy Daniels, but he did that in hopes of getting a more lenient sentence on his actual crimes of bank fraud and tax fraud, among others. The Southern District added these campaign finance violation charges to get Donald Trump to build a case of criminal conspiracy against President Trump to commit campaign finance violations. And so now we have Michael Cohen testifying to it before Congress. We have the New York Times opining about this, quoting election law professor from University of California, talking about how this is evidence of conspiracy between Michael Cohen and the President of the United States to violate campaign finance laws. So this is one of the bombshells that the media has reported about Michael Cohen's testimony, but this is something we've known for a long time. As I said, we've talked about it here on the Marc Scaringi Show. I've written about it in my columns. It's not news to us, but the media is kind of like repackaging this and using this to throw more arrows at the President of the United States. We'll talk more about Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Thanks for tuning in to WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. Glad to have you. Also to my friends on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. Thanks for tuning in and viewing us on Facebook. And you're welcome to comment live, and we'll read your comments on the air. And you're also welcome to call in, 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, and tell me what you think about Michael Cohen's testimony on Capitol Hill earlier this week. We're talking about how our friends in the media are characterizing the Michael Cohen testimony as explosive, where Cohen unleashed one bombshell after another. But is that really true? Did Michael Cohen unleash bombshells against President Trump? The New York Times is talking about how the testimony by Cohen about how Michael Cohen was in the Oval Office with the president, and the president was showing him around some of the beautiful artifacts and paintings, and while he was doing so, the president reassured Michael Cohen that his reimbursement checks were coming. They're just a little delayed, I guess, by the mail system through the White House. Our friends in the Democratic Party jumped all over that. The Mad Maxine Waters, the Democrat from California, who has been insistent for 2 years now that we must impeach 45. She has that mantra that she utters every time she gives a public appearance. She's all over this, and she believes it's evidence of conspiracy, evidence of a crime where Donald Trump was committing the crime of campaign finance violations. She refers to it as hush money, bribery, etc. The New York Times is quoting an election law attorney from the University of California, Irvine campus, talking about how this is additional evidence of conspiracy by the President of the United States to violate campaign finance law. Now, we've written about this extensively in our columns. We've talked about it on prior Marc Scaringi show episodes. So I don't want to get in too deep into the weeds here on this, but I think Michael Cohen's testimony actually undermines these alleged campaign finance conspiracy allegations. Now, first, prosecutors would have to prove that Donald Trump knowingly violated campaign finance law. So I'll pose that question to my listeners. Do you think, based upon what you've heard from Michael Cohen's testimony and what you've heard from Donald Trump's public responses to it in television interviews on Sean Hannity, on Twitter, and elsewhere, do you think Donald Trump knew that by paying Stormy Daniels for a non-disclosure agreement, he would be violating campaign finance law? Let me know what you think. Call in 717-540-0580, or you can comment live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. My response, how could Trump know that by paying Stormy Daniels he was violating campaign finance law when it had never been considered a campaign finance expenditure and thus never been considered a campaign finance violation before? And what about Michael Cohen's role in this? Michael Cohen was Trump's lawyer. Cohen is the one who is supposed to know the law, right? That's why clients hire lawyers to advise them on the law. So when Michael Cohen was discussing this payment with Trump, and remember, Cohen recorded many of his conversations with President Trump. Do you hear in those recordings Michael Cohen advising his client that these payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal would be considered campaign expenditures, and thus they can only use campaign funds, and they must disclose, they must report on their FEC filings? Did you hear that advice being given by Michael Cohen to his client, Donald Trump? Of course not. It's probably because Cohen didn't know that they would be considered violations, because they shouldn't. They aren't. And I've asked myself this question: had I been advising then candidate Donald Trump on this same fact pattern, I probably would have followed existing law, particularly in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals that has jurisdiction over the Southern District of New York, where Manhattan, where the Trump Organization is headquartered and where Donald Trump lives. And I would have followed the law in that circuit and would have concluded, and that seems to be the law across the country, would have concluded that hush money payments to former alleged lovers, or whatever you want to call them, they're not campaign expenses. Could you imagine if Trump had paid Stormy Daniels from his campaign funds? And Trump didn't accept presidential matching funds, but what if he did? Could you imagine if Donald Trump used presidential matching funds, taxpayer dollars, to pay off Stormy Daniels? I mean, all hell would have broken loose. The media would have gone hysterical. They would have accused Trump of violating those exact same campaign finance laws by using campaign funds to pay off ex-alleged lovers, the media would have screamed that there's no way those payments were legitimate campaign expenses, and they would have been right. But because they want to get Donald Trump, we're going to now kind of turn campaign finance law on its ear, and we're going to use it to try to destroy a sitting president. Now, Michael Cohen, during his testimony to Capitol Hill, again undermined his claim, in my view, that Trump ordered him to pay off Stormy Daniels as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance law, as Michael Cohen referred to it. Remember, elsewhere in his testimony, Cohen declared that Trump didn't care about winning the election. He said that Trump saw the campaign as an infomercial for the Trump brand, that he never expected, that Donald Trump, according to Michael Cohen, never expected to win the primary. He never expected to win the general election. The campaign for him was always a marketing opportunity. Those were the words of Michael Cohen before the House Reform and Oversight Committee of just a few days ago. So if Michael Cohen is true, if Trump did not care about winning the election, then the payment to Stormy Daniels could not have been for the primary purpose of influencing the election. Trump didn't care about the election. Trump didn't care if he won or if he lost. Trump, according to Michael Cohen, assumed he would lose. And Trump was only doing this to increase his brand, to increase awareness in America and around the world of the Trump brand. So people would buy more Trump condos and stay in Trump hotels and golf on Trump golf courses. That's according to Michael Cohen. So if the campaign finance law says that the expenditure is a campaign finance expenditure if the primary purpose of the expenditure is to influence the election, but Michael Cohen undermines the law he's alleging that Trump violated by his very testimony that Trump didn't care to influence the election in his behalf because Trump thought and assumed he would lose. So why do you think Trump paid off the porn star Stormy Daniels? Why do you think? Michael Cohen testified that Trump asked me to pay off adult film star Stormy Daniels, with whom he had an affair, and to lie to his wife about it. So why do you think, if you believe Cohen, that Trump told Michael Cohen to pay off Stormy Daniels and then to lie to Melania Trump about the payoff? Why would Trump want Cohen to lie to his wife, to Melania Trump? Well, Donald Trump, like many men before, did not want his wife to find out about the affair. So the purpose of the hush money payment, according to Michael Cohen's own testimony before Congress, was to keep the affair secret from Melania Trump. Obviously, Donald doesn't want his wife to know about his affair with Stormy Daniels. That would probably negatively affect his marital relationship with his wife. So that's the purpose of the hush money payment. Remember, Cohen said Trump didn't care if he won or lost the election. He assumed he would lose. So Trump didn't pay off Stormy for the primary purpose of influencing the election. So it's Michael Cohen's own testimony before Congress that undermines his own statement when Michael Cohen characterizes the Stormy Daniels hush money payment as a criminal conspiracy between himself and Donald Trump, and then he testifies and gives evidence that it's not. So Michael Cohen is obviously not a very good lawyer, but undermining his own legal position during the testimony that he gives. Let me know what you think about Michael Cohen's testimony on Capitol Hill. You can call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580, or you can comment live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. Now let's talk a little bit about Trump's response to the reporter about not knowing about the Stormy Daniels payment. Now remember, the media is focusing on that question and answer session that occurred with reporters aboard Air Force One back in April of 2018. remember President Trump standing there in the hallway of the Air Force One, the reporters in a gaggle shouting questions at him. And in one of the responses, President Trump flatly denied having any knowledge of hush money being paid before the 2016 election of Stormy Daniels. So the media and our friends in the Democratic Party are saying that's obviously a lie. Now, even if it is a lie, and we're not sure that the president was lying to a reporter is not a crime. If lying to a reporter were a crime, half of Congress would be in jail today. So rest assured, lying to a reporter is not a crime. And reporters lying are not crimes. Reporters lie all of the time. Journalists lie all of the time. Jim Acosta of CNN and on down the list. They stand up, they ask questions that contain lies. That's not a crime. If it were, most of the mainstream media and all of the left-wing media would probably be in jail today. We'll talk more about the Michael Cohen testimony before Congress and whether it truly contained explosive testimony and bombshells that are going to rock the Trump world. When we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to The Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Thanks for joining us on WHP 580 AM, iHeartRadio, and also our friends on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. You can comment live. You can call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540 if you want to tell me what you think about Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress and how our friends in the media are characterizing it as containing one bombshell after another. An explosive interview they have announced in uniform. If you flip the dial, you'll see just about everyone in the middle and on the left is characterizing the Michael Cohen testimony as explosive. But I'm talking about how Michael Cohen is characterizing a criminal conspiracy between himself and the president to violate campaign finance law. At the same time, Cohen undermines his own legal position when he talks about the fact that Donald Trump assumed he would lose, didn't really care about winning, and wanted him to lie to his wife Melania about the hush money payments. Thus, Michael Cohen presents the evidence against his own legal position and in favor of Donald Trump, that the purpose of the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels was not to influence the election. It was to influence his marital relationship with his wife Melania to keep the alleged affair from her ears. As many husbands have done over the past 2,000 years, it's standard operating procedure. It's just rich husbands, they have the financial resources to use payoffs and have nice high-priced lawyers. Well, maybe Trump should have had a better lawyer than Michael Cohen in this particular case. Have non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements for the mistresses to sign. And let's open up the phone lines. We'll take some calls. You're welcome to call into the Marc Scaringi Show, 717-540-0580. Tell me what you think about Michael Cohen's testimony on Capitol Hill. Was it a bombshell and damaging to the president? We'll open up the phone lines. Take a call. Jen from Enola, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
I'm great, Jen. How are things in Enola?
We're melting out here, but otherwise all good. But I just wanted to make a comment because, obviously this whole testimony was like kabuki theater. I think I heard that from Michael Savage.
That's a great way to describe it. That's right.
And really it was just to take away from the fact that President Trump is meeting with the dictator of North Korea and trying to make progress in getting them to denuclearize. We have all of the congressmen have a slush fund for when they're having their little dalliances. And, this is the president who actually paid out of his own money, could certainly have paid whatever funds he needed to cover up any sort of affair. And yes, I agree. He's somebody who doesn't want his wife and family to have to to go through any sort of hardships from having this slander. I had heard that there was, a $15,000 payout for some supposed love child that he had. But, this happens to all rich, powerful men. It was really just a way for them to get out there and then bring up the other issues of he's a racist, he's a sexist, to try and really have Cohen use that speech that was written by his lawyers to perform and put down any good things that Trump has done and just kind of deflect and go into the talking points of the left so they can talk about all of the terrible traits and immoral traits that Donald Trump has. And I really don't think that there's any thought that there was any real crime committed here. It's just so that there's another 24 or 48-hour news cycle going on there and deflecting from the actual summit in Korea.
Well, that's exactly right, and you reminded me, and I've forgotten about the Congressional Slush Fund, that for the past 200 years, our fine men and women in Congress have had taxpayer dollars at their disposal to pay off individuals who have brought claims against them, traditionally their own staffers and people who work for them. They sign confidentiality agreements in exchange for some cash, and those are taxpayer dollars. At least Trump's using his own money.
Yeah, and so much for the confidentiality agreement. I mean, nothing really worked for the Stormy Daniels, right?
That's right,
I've heard
yes.
about that forever. So his money was not well spent.
Well said, well said. Jen
right,
from
thank
Enola,
you, Mark.
thanks for calling. Some very wise comments from Jen from Enola. There must be some very wise and intelligent people out there in Enola, Pennsylvania. Thanks for calling. Call in 717-540-0580. 717-540-0580, and you can comment live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. We're talking about Michael Cohen's testimony to Congress before the House Oversight and Reform Committee. Democrats who control the committee are licking their chops, and they are very excited about the outcome of Michael Cohen's testimony. Several are talking about bribery, about conspiracy to commit campaign finance violations, about how there's now evidence that Michael Cohen was influenced, or his testimony was tampered with, or encouraged, written, not written, influenced by the President of the United States. So the Democrats are very excited about Michael Cohen's testimony, but I think Cohen's testimony repeats most of what the country has already known for a long time now, and actually undermines the key allegation of conspiracy to commit campaign finance violations, which is a very troublesome area for the president, because Michael Cohen pled guilty to it. Michael Cohen, when he stood before that judge that accepted his guilty plea, he testified under oath and on the record that the primary purpose of the Stormy Daniels hush money payment was to influence an election, and he did it by the instruction of, no, they didn't use the name, but it was Donald Trump. So that's where Trump is facing some real criminal jeopardy. But then Michael Cohen takes to Capitol Hill at the invitation of House Democrats who are just, as I say, licking their chops and very excited to have him come down here because they know that he's turned on Trump, that he has taken the position of the rat, and he wants to say whatever he can against the president to destroy the president, to the delight of Democrats, and in hopes that he'll get a more lenient sentence in May when he stands before the sentencing judge. So Cohen himself testifies to the criminal conspiracy, then undermines it by talking about how the president didn't care about the election and wanted to keep the hush money payment away from his wife. Okay, so we've covered this territory quite a bit on today's show. There are some other parts of Cohen's testimony that actually exonerate President Trump. What about when Cohen testified about Cohen, having lied to Congress about the alleged Trump-Russia collusion? So remember, Cohen testified that he lied to Congress, that he wanted to try to set up the president for conspiracy to lie to Congress or for suborning perjury or witness tampering. Now, Michael Cohen didn't say that, but that was obviously why Cohen was there testifying before Congress last week, to set up the president to provide evidence to Congress that the president was allegedly conspiring with Cohen to lie to Congress when Cohen testified before Congress before he pled guilty, to kind of set up the president to be charged with subornation of perjury or witness tampering. But I think Michael Cohen came up laughably short on doing so. Cohen testified that Trump did not directly tell me to lie. So that should have ended the case against Trump before it even starts. Remember, Cohen is claiming that Trump told him to lie through winks and nods, some sort of like hand gestures or some absurdity that is not evidence, and even if it were evidence, is clearly insufficient and not substantial enough as a basis for a criminal charge that Trump was tampering with a witness or Trump was encouraging Michael Cohen to perjure himself before he testified before Congress the first time. So Cohen himself said under oath on the record just a few days ago that President Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. So case closed. There should be no case against Donald Trump for subornation of perjury, which would likely be the charge. Now, on the alleged Trump-Russian conspiracy, again, the media is talking about bombshells, explosive testimony, but here again, Michael Cohen undermines the entire liberal media and congressional Democratic narrative that there was some sort of collusion between President Trump and the government of Russia to interfere in the 2016 election. Remember, Cohen testified before Congress just a few days ago. He said, "I wouldn't use the word colluding." Really? Okay, so thank you, Michael Cohen, for testifying that the word collusion is not the right word. So Michael Cohen doesn't have any evidence of any collusion. What did Michael Cohen come up with? What did he testify to? He said, well, there was something odd about the back and forth praise with President Putin and Donald Trump. That's it. So the most Michael Cohen, Trump's longtime personal lawyer and fixer, the most he can offer about this alleged Trump-Russian collusion is that he watched the president on live television during campaign rallies and during interviews praise the Russian president. That's it. That's the evidence that Michael Cohen brought to congressional Democrats earlier this week. We'll talk more about Michael Cohen's testimony to the House Reform and Oversight Committee when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Now back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day. We're talking about Michael Cohen's testimony before Capitol Hill. But before we continue, I want to say that's we've heard some calls. We've taken some calls and we've gotten some comments on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. So you can view us through Harrisburg 100 and you can comment live, or you can call in 717-540-0580. And we're talking, and we have Jason Eby who comments on Harrisburg 100. The only thing explosive about that hearing, as if we didn't already know, is that Michael Cohen would not admit there was Russian collusion. And that's exactly right. And in fact, the way Michael Cohen testified, we can conclude that that he was not aware of any evidence to suggest there was collusion. The only thing that Cohen came up with is that Trump praises Vladimir Putin. That's evidence of collusion. Not in this world, not in this lifetime. That's evidence of nothing. Trump's entire modus operandi is that he unloads on just about every person on the planet, from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high, if they oppose him. If they do something nice or say something or don't attack him, then they're wonderful. They're fantastic people. So they're either fantastic people or they're horrible losers, according to Donald Trump. He utters those epithets all of the time, and they can change on a dime. Look at the way the President Trump speaks about Kim Jong-un. Sometimes he calls him the Rocket Man. and cajoles him and bullies him or attempts to bully him through Twitter. And then other times he says he's a great man and a great leader, and he's my dear friend. I mean, that's how Trump operates. He's a salesman. He's a negotiator. He uses language of flattery or language of cajolery, if that's a word, based upon the situation at hand. He's trying to get what he wants, so he's using language to his advantage. Do you know anybody on planet Earth who does that? I think just about every single person living in this world today. That doesn't mean you're colluding with the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. It's just absurd. And we'll talk about the Trump Tower meeting in a minute, but I want to get to some of these phone calls that we have here. We have Bob. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show. What do you think about Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress? Yes, Bob, can you hear us? You're on the Marc Scaringi Show.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, Mark.
Yes, go ahead.
I agree. I watched it for a little bit, and he just didn't say anything that really implicated the president. In fact, he seemed to exonerate a lot. I figure the president's going to end up pardoning the guy. But the question I have is, why isn't there any attorney-client privilege anymore for President Trump in this situation? And why wouldn't the president expect whatever Cohen was doing for him to be legal? He's a lawyer. That's all I have to ask.
Yeah, I mean, excellent points. Now, with regard to attorney-client privilege, I believe that Trump's lawyer, his current lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, waived privilege with respect to communications between Donald Trump and Michael Cohen. So I think that is the case. So that would allow Michael Cohen to testify to and to disclose, not just testify, but just to disclose in general the communications between Donald Trump and himself. Now, with regard to the attorney-client privilege, in a more broader context, yes. What about those congressional Republicans who cross-examined Michael Cohen and revealed that Cohen willfully turned over 100 tape recordings of 100 other clients, and that he didn't do, apparently, with the consent of his clients. So he has multiple attorney-client violations there of the attorney-client privilege and violations of the rules of professional conduct in the state of New York. It doesn't matter. However, apparently Michael Cohen has been disbarred. But you're exactly right. Attorney-client is a sacred, ancient privilege. But Michael Cohen just kind of threw that to the wind when he was, in fear for the loss of his own liberty. So that's the unfortunate position taken by Michael Cohen. But Bob, thanks for calling. Appreciate that call.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Bob's right. We already know much of what was testified to, and Michael Cohen essentially exonerated President Trump on key issues. On this allegation that there was some sort of conspiracy to commit campaign finance violations, on this allegation that there was some sort of conspiracy or subordination of perjury. I keep saying porridge, I guess is the word I want to say. Perjury, that the president influenced Michael Cohen to lie to Congress. Cohen said no, not directly. I guess it was some sort of a head shake or body movement that Michael Cohen was reading, and that's just nutty stuff. That's insufficient to substantiate any criminal charges, although you never know. With the Southern District of New York, they had no problem bringing campaign finance violation charges when there was no campaign finance violation. And also on the Russian Trump alleged conspiracy, that's just such a joke at this. It's been a joke for 2 years. I've been writing about this. If you go back and look at my old columns on Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News for 2 years, I've been writing that this collusion is a fraud. There's nothing to it. There's no evidence. It didn't happen. It's all manufactured. It's all fabricated. But we're still hearing about it. We're still spending taxpayer dollars to have Democrats in the House committee subpoena Michael Cohen, bring him in, talk about the discussions that Cohen had with Trump, talk about whatever Michael Cohen can fabricate that the president was colluding with Vladimir Putin to throw the election. It's an absolute absurdity that the American people are still paying for this charade. And as one of our more astute listeners called in and referred to it as kabuki theater, which is exactly what it is. Michael Cohen is convicted of lying to Congress, yet he was called back to Congress by House Democrats to testify to them again, but in such a way that they thought would further implicate the president in various and assorted crimes. But it turns out they've got egg on their face. It backfired on them. Cohen, through his testimony, exonerated the president in several key ways, which our callers are pointing out and our commenters on Harrisburg 100 are pointing out. They're much wiser than House Democrats, apparently. The Trump Tower meeting, that was also, oh my gosh, I mean, how many articles in the New York Times, Washington Post, I mean, how many segments of news, talk radio, and television commentators have been talking about the Trump Tower meeting. Oh my goodness, with the alleged Russian agents. Remember when last July CNN reported that Michael Cohen told special counsel Robert Mueller that Trump knew in advance about the June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower in which Russians were expected to offer his campaign dirt on Hillary Clinton, and that he was present, that Michael Cohen was present, along with several others, when Trump was informed of Russia's offer by Donald Trump Jr. So is that what Cohen said during his testimony to Congress? No. Cohen testified that he didn't know about the Trump Tower meeting in advance and only learned of it by reading about it in the media and watching it on television, watching CNN reports about the Trump Tower meeting. That's how Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's confidant and personal lawyer, that's how he found out about the Trump Tower meeting. And what about this insinuation that Donald Trump Jr. came into Trump's office when Cohen was there meeting with Trump, and Donald Trump Jr. Snuck up behind Trump's chair and whispered something into his ear. He whispered, "Daddy, Daddy, the Russians are going to meet with us, and we're going to talk about how we're going to rig the election." Come on. I mean, this is just nutty, goofy stuff. Michael Cohen is desperate to come up with something. What Michael Cohen testified to is that Trump Jr. whispered into his daddy's ear and said, "The meeting is all set." That's it. Do you know how many meetings President or then candidate Trump took? You listen to Trump Jr., Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump. You listen to any businessman. All they talk about is meetings they take. They take meetings here. They meet with this person. They meet with that person. It's all about meetings, right? I mean, how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meetings do these Trump family business people have every day? And particularly when you're on a campaign, it's just meeting after meeting after meeting. So Trump Jr. whispers, "Daddy, the meeting is all set." What does Michael Cohen conclude? That's it. Trump is meeting with Putin. Trump is meeting with the Russians. The Russians are going to give us something. I don't know, the keys to the voting booths where we can go in there and undo the votes for Hillary and redo them into Trump's name. I mean, who knows? It's just crazy stuff. That's where we are. That's where the House Democrats have brought this country. And that's the shame of the whole thing. It's all a facade. It's all a charade. It's all, as one of our very wise and astute listeners said, it's all kabuki theater. And by the way, it's all on your dime. You're paying for all of this. You're paying for House Democrats to bring in Michael Cohen, a convicted liar, to Congress to lie some more. And that's where we are today in the world of politics and all things Trump. I want to thank you for listening to the Marc Scaringi Show. You can tune in every Saturday at 1 p.m. on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And you can check in, be a friend, and follow us on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live and hear about the important political and legal issues of the day. Thank you and have a great weekend. Hi, this is attorney Marc Scaringi. Every Saturday afternoon at 1, thousands of central Pennsylvanians listen to the Marc Scaringi Show on WHP 580. It's a program about state, local, and national politics from the point of view of putting America first. If your business or organization would like to reach my listeners, you can advertise on my show. Promote your business on the only weekend political show in central PA. Call 717-657-7770 and talk with Jason to promote your business on the Marc Scaringi Show.